So welcome to the latest edition of the podcast, A Trip Down Goddington Lane, which is a chance to catch up and reconnect with old Olavians, talk about their sporting journey and find out how sport has impacted on their lives. So again, I'll be your host, Andy Kenward, and with me, as always, is Mike Perks. And equally as always, behind the scenes is sixth former James Double, who does all the clever IT stuff. I'm also going to give a mention today to Alfie Beston, one of our students, who put together the jingle that you can hear at the start of this podcast. So Alfie, thank you very much for your contribution. But the star of today's show is James Toop. James Toop was another excellent all-round sportsman. You might be getting bored of me saying that, they all seem to be, but James Toop's achievements really are the stuff of legend. He was an excellent rugby and cricket player representing the first team, but it was in fives that he really was something of a superstar. He won 4 national Eton Fives championships, 6 national Rugby Fives championships, which was the second most titles in history. He's the only person to have won both codes of the game of fives. He got a full blue from Oxford University in the year 2000 and then set up England handball, bringing handball to inner city schools. Since university, James was the CEO of Ambition Institute for 8 years, leading to it becoming the largest leadership development charity in education. James was a teacher in the inaugural cohort of Teach First and has worked for ARC and Monitor Group. He is chair of Angel Oak Academy, Peckham, on the board of English Mastery, and is a former trustee of the Access Project. A couple of years ago, he then set up a new charity, which you may have heard of, called Bite Back 2030, which he set up with Jamie Oliver. And the aim is to halve childhood obesity by 2030, focusing on diet, nutrition, and physical activity. James, thank you for giving up your time and welcome to the podcast. I'm not quite sure how you got time to fit us in, but thank you for doing so.
Pleasure. Well, great to be on the podcast, and hopefully share some memories from down the lane.
That is what we're very much looking forward to. So I normally start with sort of saying, let's talk about your school days, but actually, and we will get to that. But it seems to me that what you're doing at the moment is really fascinating. Are you able to maybe expand on the charity work that you're involved in?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. I mean, it's a really, really funny one because I suppose I got into the job initially because I thought with someone who's got a real interest in sport and physical activity that I was going to be getting into something that was promoting loads of that. And when you look at the science and the data behind childhood obesity, there were lots of myths, I think, around it and what drove obesity. And actually, most of it is diet and nutrition. So Jamie likes to say, you can't outrun a bad diet. There's a lot of what we're trying to do is to change the food environment, like what kids see on high streets, the food that's served in schools, and to try and make that healthier. Because at the moment, like the diet that's served up to young people in the UK over the last 40 years has got progressively more towards highly processed food on the go, takeaways, snacks, which has sort of then seen the surge of obesity rates amongst kids. And the other thing is that it's heavily determined by how much your parents earn. So if you're poorer, you are twice as likely to be overweight or obese as young people who live in the richest parts of the country. And so a big part of what really drove me to it was trying to address some of those inequalities and level the playing field as well. And if you think about it, the poorer you are and the poorer you become, the less opportunity you have to buy fresh fruit and fresh veg. You've got to, you've got less disposable income to spend on fresher food, and which is typically more expensive than cheaper processed food. So I was really surprised getting into it how much I'd get into food, diet, and nutrition. It's been a real journey.
It sounds so interesting. Do you think some of this has its roots in? I mentioned when I was sort of talking about the history of what you've been up to over the years. That when you set up England handball for those inner city schools, you've obviously always had an interest in areas of social deprivation, perhaps, and so on. Do you think there was an element of that in it, or was that just by chance?
Yeah, I think. I think from Teach First days, all of my work, bar a few years in management consultancy, all of it has been about trying to address some type of inequality or some type of injustice. So Teach First, for the listeners who don't know the program, you go into a really challenging school, typically has quite high levels of children on free school meals, and you teach there for 2 years. And so what it's about is trying to get the best teaching talent into some of the most challenging schools. And this is going back 20 years when schools have really come on over the last 20 years and progressed so far in their standards and attainment. But it was really hard then 20 years ago to get graduates to go and teach in some of the toughest schools. And so I went in and did that. And actually, I remember I trained up I brought them back to Olave's actually, because I was teaching in New Addington, and I got the kids from the school to go to Olave's. I trained them up in fives. I took them into the nationals to play against Eton and Uppingham and all of these other schools. And to have kids from New Addington competing against those schools, we had a piece on the BBC London News. We were in the Guardian, and so like that. I don't know, just trying to give opportunities and broaden horizons and address some of those inequalities has been something that's gone through my career. And Ambition, we were basically training up amazing middle leaders and head teachers so that you had the best leadership talent in schools that typically couldn't attract it either, and to try and really create amazing schools. So that's always been a thread throughout everything that I've done, and I guess it's been in education for the last 10-15 years and has now moved out to child health and nutrition.
And is 2030, I mean, I don't know, in some ways that seems a long way away, but in other ways, maybe for you with your project, that seems like, it's not far away at all. Does it feel like an overly ambitious program, or do you feel like, no, that's the date we can achieve this by?
I definitely think we can achieve it, but I think we need to move really fast. I mean, it is literally like turning around an oil tanker. A lot of what we focus on is trying to is government engagement. So the way it was when we set it up, I have to say I hadn't really sort of thought too much about the childhood obesity debate, but there was a lot of discussion and debate about it, and it was typically public health professionals like the chief medical officer talking about how we needed to do things like reformulate food, which means like take sugar, salt and fat out of food, versus the food industry, who were trying to lobby to advertise and promote basically really unhealthy food to kids, so they get them hooked on it and eat more and more of it. And so it's why you see cartoon characters on kids products, kid food. It's why a lot of the students at Olave's will be getting targeted Instagram messaging from Uber Eats and Domino's and all of, and so, but there was never the voice of young people in the debate. And we said, look, actually what we want to do is make this about young people really leading the change and calling for the change they want to see. So Bite Back is a youth-led movement, and typically
and that's really evident from the website. If you look on that, the pictures of that, it's not, I know Jamie Oliver, sort of a big name and so on. But when I looked through it, I think I found one picture of Jamie Oliver, and there were just loads of pictures of young people. So that message seems really clear.
We felt that they're putting the power in youth leadership, and there's more and more of this. Obviously, the most famous is like Greta Thunberg or Malala Yousafzai, but it's like, let's put the power in young people's hands and let them tell government the change they want to see, tell corporates what they want to change, tell their head teachers how they want the school food environment to be healthier and fairer. One of our teenagers started a petition in the very early days of lockdown. It was the first petition to get free school meals funded through the holidays. And Christina was her name. She spearheaded the first 2 government U-turns at Easter and May half term last year. And so not many people know, but like those 2 U-turns paved the way for the Rashford campaign that kicked off in the summer. And if we hadn't had those 2 U-turns, I don't think there would have been a big summer campaign to do. And just on Monday, we've been, one of our youth leaders has been leading a campaign, a guy called Dev from Leicester. He's at year 11 now. To try and put an end to online targeting of kids with junk food marketing. And we've just released a report that was in the Sunday Times, and Dev was presenting to a roundtable of MPs and peers from the House of Lords to put across his perspective. So it is really powerful. And, if I've seen anything over the last sort of 10, 20 years, it's also been the rise of youth leadership. And, we one of the things I think we often get wrong is we just don't listen enough to young people, because they see it and they know, and they're the ones with lived experience of the issues. And, the more we can put the power in their hands, I think it's a much more powerful message, and it's coming directly from the kids who want to see the change.
Yeah, and really inspiring, isn't it, for us to see that? And obviously for us in education as well, to see young people thrive when they're given that opportunity must be really rewarding for you to sort of see that and see what they're achieving. And I'm sure that they are, not that they're doing it for this, but they're learning all sorts of skills as they're going along, having been given this platform to present from as well. And that's obviously something that I want to sort of delve into with you, James, at some point during this, is sort of what skills you've learned as you've gone along, and in particular in relation to sport, where you've been heavily involved in sport for many years, and how sport has sort of helped you get to where you are now, have the skills that you are, and sort of shape you as a person. So to do that, perhaps we need to sort of delve back a little bit into what a young James Toop was like. What are your memories from school and getting into sport, and what you were like as a person, as a youngster?
Gosh, that is going back a long way, but I'll do my best. I mean, as you said, like sport has been everything to me, and I still do it regularly now. It's just a habit that you form, I think, at an early age, and then you continue into adulthood. But everything I've learned from a leadership perspective, I've learned on the rugby pitch or on the fives court, or and I think and I have to say, like, a massive amount I learned from the teachers at school, but in particular Howard Wiseman, who's was my coach and now lifelong friend and fives partner, and but I've learned so much, I think, from him, and just what he brought to practice and training. But I think when I was young, I always had a natural aptitude for anything with a ball. I don't think I did particularly well on like long distance cross country, but give me a rugby ball or a cricket ball or a fives ball, and I was very much at home. I was always really competitive. I think I've definitely mellowed over the years. I would definitely mentally, I'd lose it at points. My weakness always on a fives court was that I would get too angry or cross or frustrated with things, and I would sort of like lose a set just from trying to get over that point. And I think I've learned to sort of manage, I think, the emotional side of it. But I think for sport, it's the discipline, the training, the practice, the mental strength. When you get in a tough situation, and you're staring defeat in the face, how you turn that around and you get back onto a winning streak. I mean, you learn so much from it, and and it's the people as well. It's the friends you make. Fives is sort of slightly different as well, because when you're playing rugby, you've got all your teammates, and fives, you do often play in teams, but very often it's your pair. And the psychology of playing literally with one other person on court who you're standing next to, like you're literally almost touching each other shoulder by shoulder a lot of the match. How you convey positivity in your body language, support each other, like that's something I think is a real art that I've learned over the years as well.
Well, that's really something I wanted to sort of delve into with you, because you're one of those sportsmen who, known for your fives primarily, but equally I know that you're a very strong sort of team player, as I say, as a rugby player, and as a very strong cricket player. But they're all very different, aren't they, in terms of that team dynamic? Where did you feel most comfortable? Did you feel more comfortable as part of that bigger team when you've got you and 14 other people on a rugby pitch? Or did you feel more comfortable when it was just you and just one other person? How does that change the psychology for you?
I always I probably actually it's funny because I'd add in rugby fives as well, which I picked up when I went to Oxford. I actually felt most comfortable playing rugby fives when I was on my own. I think probably after years of Eton fives, where probably one of my other weaknesses was like that I always used to worry about my partner too much and how they were playing, and Howard always used to just say to me, like, just focus on yourself, just do what you can do, because and I think actually in rugby fives it was really nice and liberating not have to worry about anybody else. You could just concentrate on yourself. I really enjoyed that bit of it. And like rugby fives is also very different physically to Eton fives. You know, a lot of it is about the training you do off the court to get your fitness level up to it's a bit like marathon running. It's sort of you on your own, sort of pushing yourself. And then probably at the other end, I really love the rugby. I have to say, like looking back on it now, I don't think our year group was particularly strong. We were all a bit too small. But I really enjoyed that environment, and playing with the team. And I played at fly half or scrum half, so I often felt like I was really in the centre of the game and directing play. And that, that bit I really haven't had that kind of camaraderie in the same way that you're all in it together in that moment on the pitch. So I think at those two ends of the spectrum, those are probably the most enjoyable experiences. And like cricket, although there's 11 of you, that cricket often is dominated by individual performances, and although it is a team sport, if you're batting, a lot of the time you're kind of really living to see how many runs you score, and if you're a bowler, it's how many wickets do you take. So cricket's more of a kind of collection of individual performances tied together, and obviously the more of them that go well, the more likely the team is to win. So I definitely felt it was like rugby and probably rugby fives at the other ends that I love the most.
Picking up on the Eton fives, then somewhere in the middle, where it's you and one other, you and a partner. This always intrigues me, this, because, like I say, it's quite an intense partnership relationship. With lots of the people you'll have played with, the Seb Coolies and so on, you'll have played them presumably for a number of years, and you build up a real rapport. Does the psychology change slightly if you are the dominant player in that pair? I suspect for you mostly, and I know you'll be modest about this, but I suspect mostly in your playing career, James, you've been the better player. How does it change, though, if you've ever had the experience of thinking, actually, my partner's loads better than me now or much worse? Does that have an impact on your performance?
It does. Yeah, it does. It does change it, because I think so I won 3 under 18 national Eton Fives titles at school, and I think still the only person to have done that. But we was with 3 different partners as well. And the first year I won it when I was year 11 with Matt Wiseman, who was a couple of years older. And I at that point I hadn't won anything big, but I was sort of brought in to be the steady hand. Like Matt had amazing flair and could destroy opponents. But when he got he got very nervous in like the big matches. And so Matt just needed someone who was really, really steady, to just keep things going. And
was that more, when you say steady, does that, you're talking presumably partly about performance, but you're also talking about you were the calming influence for him as well, not just from playing perhaps, but trying to calm his mental state down as well, so that his state of arousal in terms of playing wasn't too high and you got carried away and so on. Is that a fair comment? Or
yeah, I think so, because there's also something quite scary about someone who just doesn't make mistakes, doesn't show emotion. If you're the opponents, it's you'll just be like, God, this person doesn't seem to react to anything, and everything I throw at them, they just sort of keep ticking along. So I think it was definitely that. And I remember, my God, Matt and I had it was the first day, I think, that Olave's had ever won a big national Eton Fives title back in 1997. And Seb Cooley and I played in the under-16 final in the morning against a pair that had never been beaten before from Eton, and we beat them in 4 sets. And and it was a really epic match. And I suppose I was the more dominant player in that partnership at the time. Although I have to say, Seb has completely obliterated all of my Eton Fives titles. Now he's won so many. One of the lessons I've learned as well is if you were good or not the best at school doesn't mean you won't be the best as an adult. Like if you keep training and keep practicing, there are loads of great Fives players who were average at school, and Seb was way better than average. But like a lot of people who are average, who just keep playing, have won lots of national titles. So like never give up, keep training. But that was different in the morning. And then after a 4-set match, which lasted about 3 hours in the morning, Matt and I then played a 5-set semi-final where I think we went 2-0 up, lost the next 2 sets. And like literally that 5th set was like touch and go. I think it right up until the end. And we played for about 4.5 hours. I mean, it was mental. I can't even remember what the question was now, but like I was, I played very different roles in both those partnerships. And I think over the years it changed. Like the second year when Johnny Rees and I in '98 we ended up playing Harrow in the final. And I think, and then similarly in '99 when Seb and I played that same Eton pair that we'd beaten 2 years before under 16s, like I think Johnny Rees and Seb Cooley kind of kept me together, to be honest. There was like, the pressure just sort of built because it was in the second year, John and I could have won it, 2 titles in a row, and then the third with Seb. And I kind of almost needed Seb and Johnny to get through the first couple of sets before I steadied down. So I think it does. Yeah, there's pressure on everybody, but pressure in different ways. And I think, there's definitely different roles and different pressures in those situations.
Do you like pressure? Do you like pressure, or did you not like pressure?
I definitely. I mean, it's a really good question. I mean, I really love the competitive situation. You've got to put yourself in those really difficult, high pressure situations to win titles. And so it's much easier when you're chasing someone down than when you're being chased. And so I had it in rugby fives, because of the 6 rugby fives singles that I won 5 of them back to back. So and every year, like the pressure of everyone chasing you down, you've kind of got to reframe that in your mind. And I used to, at various points, I sort of got a bit down about it, because you feel like everyone's hunting you the whole time. And, every time you go on court, all you can really do is lose, because if you've won, then you've just met everyone else's expectations. And everyone expected you to win anyway. But if you don't, you've got all of this pressure building up on you. And I actually had some, it wasn't sports psychology, but it was like I had a psychologist. I worked with him. It was actually someone who worked with me in the school leadership charity. And we sort of just talked about how you need to reframe it in your mind, and that actually you're playing a really kind of important role, right? Because you're setting the bar that everyone else is trying to work up to. And actually, rather than feeling like all you can do is lose, what you're kind of, it's your job to sort of stay there and to make yourself unbeatable and let everybody else chase you. That's sort of part of the dynamic of the game. And I, it just really helped me kind of reframe how I thought about the pressure and the situation. But it's definitely way easier to get to number one than it is to stay at number one, I think. So very different situations, I think. And it's also really hard, I think. It's just hard to sustain that focus and that energy, I think, as well.
At school, go on then, Mike. Jump in.
Sorry to jump in here, guys. I love that concept of reframing pressure, and you apply it strictly in a sports context of how you used it as almost like a motivational tool to stay ahead of the game. Would you say that that's come into your professional life now? And is there examples that you can give where you kind of actually maybe gone into a big presentation or delivered on a really important project, and actually have got yourself a little bit worked up, but then thought, actually, I've got tools, I've got experiences where I've had to deal with that pressure. Have you got any examples or any like applications like that at all, James?
So, I mean, I'm very lucky. Like in a lot of my career, I've been like leading organizations, and there's always pressure leading an organization. You know, you're no one ever remembers you know what you did a year ago. You're that thing sports people say is you're only as good as your last performance. Like, it's definitely true. And so that there are lots of competitive situations at work, but I think because I work in the charity sector, the not-for-profit sector, it's a much more collaborative environment. Ultimately the issues and the problems you're trying to fix require multiple people to all work together from different organizations. So to solve that ultimate problem, like Bite Back 2030 on its own won't halve childhood obesity. We need to be working with other health NGOs, government, Public Health England, all of those people together. And I don't know, in my work role, I think about myself more as the I don't know, I'd probably go for like Jurgen Klopp or somebody. My job is to on certain things I want to be competitive, but actually most of the time what I'm trying to do is to get the best out of everybody else, to take everybody else on the journey. And so I've almost had to find myself like if I in that leadership role, if I'm getting too competitive or I'm wanting to push things too hard, I'm invariably demotivating other people or disempowering them. And so I've like that mindset that I've had on court, that kind of I've had to actually adapt and change at work. Where I think it really does come into its own is when you're properly backed into a corner, or something goes really wrong, that ability to stay calm under pressure and go, right, okay, I've been here before. It can't get as bad as this thing. And I know, like if anyone who's played a particular sport, right, you often some days you just go on court and it's just not working for you. And a lot of people talk about flow in sport, and like how on certain days everything will just be working for you. And I actually again adapted a lot of my practice, because I often used to think like if I just try really hard it's going to get better, and if I wasn't playing well it was because I wasn't trying hard enough and I wasn't and actually I started to deconstruct. I read quite a lot of sports players who choked on the stories about a tennis player who forgot how to serve because the pressure just got to their heads. And actually I remember like breaking down all of my shots or my strategy into a game of like, right, here are the 3 things I have to focus on, and I'm going to work hard at implementing those. And it kind of just got me away from the pressure I was feeling to actually just deconstructing the basics of the shots to get you through those difficult moments. And I suppose in work, I've definitely now gone into situations where I've just said, right, okay, I just need to like get through today or get through this week. And as long as I don't give up and I'm still in the game, it's going to get better next week or the week. Something's going to happen. Some trigger's going to happen that's going to start to shift the balance. And that probably has come from being match point 2 sets down in a 5s match where we've been able to turn it around. So I definitely, so those bits I think I've been able to adapt.
A concept, really great to hear your stories there, James. A concept that comes to mind I've never met you before, this is the first time, about you, James, would be the concept of self-awareness. You seem like an incredibly self-aware individual, both when you were young, knowing your role on the court or on the rugby pitch or in the cricket field. But now that is almost transferred, that self-awareness is transferred into your leadership role in your business life. That concept of self-awareness, how important would you say that is as a leader, both in your business life but on the sports field?
I mean, I think I don't know if I'd say it's the most important thing, but it's like definitely one of the most important things. I mean, I think, what is it, the old phrase, like, know thyself, right? I think that if you know what you're good at, you know, I think going back to that thing about pressure, right? If you know what your triggers are, I spend a lot of, or used to spend a lot of time sort of in fives as well, going like, right, how do I kind of create this outer body experience? Like, if I could step out of myself and like look at myself now and go, right, okay, I can see what's happening. I know why you're feeling pressure here, right? How do you start to go, you know what makes you worry about things, what gets you stressed. I think that's that sports stuff I've definitely taken into work. I mean, you take it everywhere. You take it into, hope my wife doesn't listen to this, but like you take it into marriage, and particularly under things like lockdown, right? As much of it's, I think it's not just knowing yourself. I think it's also having that awareness about how other people tick. Fives, and I'm still playing, 25 years later with Matt Wiseman. It's kind of like a marriage, right? You go through the highs, the lows, you're in that collective endeavor together. And I think you have to know the other people and the other people around you really well. So, and I spend quite a lot of time at work role modeling. I'll sort of deconstruct and talk about what I'm finding difficult, because it kind of creates a culture and an environment where actually you allow other people to talk about it. I did some work with a lady called Kath Bishop, who was an Olympic rower. And she's written a book recently about the pressure that got put into Team GB and the kind of the hunt for medals, that is now, we're now starting to see it unravel a bit, and stories of too much pressure being put on athletes. And I definitely think there's something about the leader's role, as well as being self-aware, knowing others. It's also about creating that culture where, it's okay to say you're finding something really hard. It's okay, to say you're struggling with stuff, or, and to talk about why you haven't performed that well. And I think that's definitely something I didn't do as well at school. I think like that maturity is mostly come. I still have like good days and bad days. But I think when I was younger, that was where I just, I needed Howard Wiseman to basically be that's a voice of self-awareness. And like, he knew me so well. He's almost like me in my CEO role in my charity life now. Like, he did when I was a kid, just coaching me, knowing just the right things to say, when to pick me up and tell me I was amazing, when to tell me the things I need to do better. I think when you're younger, like that maturity and self-awareness comes, but mostly when you're at school, you're trying to figure yourself out, and mostly through university as well, you're still learning all of that stuff. So and I think, I think a lot of what I learned, from that leadership perspective also just came from Howard. I think it's sort of any time I ever talk about fives and school days and whatever, I mean, there were loads of amazing staff and friends at Olave's. It's such an incredible place. But I think, if I had to single anyone out as an influence who sort of shaped my life, it would be Howard.
That's excellent, James. It's so refreshing to hear you speak so positively about the school, but also your experiences. If I could delve into that concept of leadership a little bit more, a lot of the Olavians which will be listening to this podcast will be endeavouring to go into leadership roles in sport, in life, more broadly. If you were to give them some advice, or maybe attributes that you look for in a leader, what would you say would be maybe your top few points, phrases, values? What would you say they'd be? So
I'm a massive fan of servant leadership. So in that model, like no one's bigger than the cause. I think there used to be this concept of hero leadership where we'll take it to a fives context, right? You're the amazing fives player and you can kind of win the match on your own, or the best player in the rugby team who scores these heroic tries, right? That I sort of think that notion of heroic leadership has led to some of the cultural failings we've seen in organizations and in sporting contexts as well. Like I'm a real fan now of, you are there for the bigger goal, and your job is to play your part in achieving that particular goal. So with that comes humility. It's about collaboration, about developing others, and I think you definitely want to see people who are confident, who know their stuff, who get stuff done. Like in any work environment, you need to see people who are organized, who I think can I trust this person to get done what they need to get done. That's like, but for me that's like a bare minimum. Like it's the people who can who think bigger, who will say in a team, look, that wasn't me, that was them who did that, they did an amazing job. It's that humility, it's the development of others, the collaboration, that's sort of that team thing that I think is really, really important. And I think like if your goal is to be the leader, it's probably the wrong goal. I think like focus on developing and demonstrating the leadership characteristics and you'll probably go further faster. It's a bit like, a bit like I was saying in where I got to with fives. It's like if I thought about winning the match, I'd start to feel the pressure and the and the fear of losing the match. But if I think about, okay, right, my job is to do, this is my tactics and I'm going to do these things really, really well, I found I would find my flow and perform even better.
So that's excellent, and I love the words humility in there. I know you make reference to that. And I'm reading a book at the moment. It's called Legacy. I'm not sure whether you've come across it, but it's written from about the New Zealand All Blacks. And in the first chapter of the book, they reference the word humility and how it's the foundation of the All Blacks mantra, and how they've got almost this sweep the sheds mentality. And they tell a story about Richie McCaw, who had just become the most capped captain of All Black history. And they have the wonderful presentation, and then as soon as the presentation finishes, he's the one who's picking up the brush and he's sweeping the dirt out of the changing rooms. And it's just so refreshing to hear kind of your context and use that word humility as well. It's something which as teachers we all always endeavour to try and teach the value of, but you almost need to live it and breathe it yourself to really understand the true meaning of the word. So that was great, James. So thank you very much for that story.
What interests me as well, James, you talk a lot about community, and I think of all the sports, every sport will fight their corner, and quite rightly. But the fives community is quite unique in many ways, and we still see that today at school, where you'll have year sevens on a court, and they might be pairing up with a sixth former to play, and obviously it lends itself to that. Not every sport is able to sort of have that, and I think that was still the case back when you started. There was that strength sort of across the years, and we are one sort of fives family, to put it bluntly.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, if nothing else, it wasn't very cool to play fives when I was at school, so you kind of had to stick together for that reason, if nothing else.
Well, you made it cool, James. I think it's fair to say.
Well, that's very, it might be the only thing ever, I think. Certainly my kids tell me that. But no, I mean, I think, definitely there were always opportunities to mix together and play with different years. And I think, I used to, from a really early age, play a lot of adult fives. So right from year 7, year 8, I was going off and playing in league matches with adults. And I think the older Olavian community has been really, really strong in that as well. So, and I still have done so less recently, but certainly for a good number of years after I left school, I'd go back and coach a lot of the youngsters coming up through the school who are now older Olavians. So yeah, I think that's always been a real kind of core part of it, and just being part of the fun of it as well. And I think it also helps that you could go and play these. I always remember trying to get my maths right, but we used to play like 16 pair matches at Eton, where we'd go off in a massive bus, and the result of that match, I remember the first time that we beat Eton, it was a really, really big moment for the school. I think we were probably I was year 10 or year 11, but you put out whatever, four pairs at under 18, 5 pairs at under 16, bunch of pairs at under 15, right the way down to under 14, and like the match gets done by each court that gets won. So I think it was a 15 pair match and we won 8-7. But you had sixth formers watching year 9s, willing them to win because of the effect it had on the overall result. And I think that's probably one of the only sports where you get that kind of dynamic, where you've got and so I think that was really special. And again, I would sort of be remiss if I didn't say again Howard, who I think has also been a huge part of creating that culture. But I think even before Howard, I think the old Olavian culture went back, and there was a really strong, if you went back to Tooley Street, there was a really strong Fives community back in Tooley Street before moving out to Orpington.
James, at school, in terms of sport, when would you say you were at your happiest?
Do you mean age, or in which place, or?
Yeah, in terms of what you were doing, what would have made you happy at school? What would have brought you joy in terms of sport? Was it winning? Was it just taking part? Was it a particular sport or a particular memory?
One of the things that really stood well. Can I give a few, and you can edit them out if I remember we, as I said before, like rugby, we weren't an amazing, like we were a good team, but we struggled to put too many wins together. And I remember going to, we played Campion in probably an upper sixth, first 15 match. And I think the ref had to stop the match once they got to 6 figures, or they were close anyway. And then we played them again about a month later in the Daily Mail Cup, and we lost again, but I think we lost like 18-7, and it was a much closer game. And basically I just remember being really proud of like everyone in the team who rose to that occasion. And just the difference in performance level, like we could be really proud and hold our heads up. And it was just, I think as a rugby team, it was one of our proudest performances, even though we lost. Certainly stuck in my mind. I definitely, from a Fives perspective, I think like I probably have like 2 ends of the spectrum, right? I can vividly remember loads of the great moments, like from school career, and they were, a lot of the time they were firsts. It was the first time that we won the Williams Cup, the first time that we won a national title, and I think probably that day that I described before, where we won the under 16 nationals in the morning and the under 18 semi-finals in the afternoon, and then won the under 18s the next day. That was just incredible. Like it was just, and I think it was the proximity of all of those big wins, one after the other, just sort of built up into just this massive thing that was a first for the school as well. And we'd stayed up in Eton, and because we had to stay on for the finals, I remember staying in a B&B on Eton High Street with Howard and Seb and Matt, which you probably wouldn't be allowed to do these days, but we did it then. And like it was a whole experience around that was just magical. So that you sort of definitely got caught up in the bubble of that. But I also remember being really happy, every break time. Again, I don't think you can do this these days because the courts are probably locked at break time. But then you used to be able to go down to the courts without any teacher supervision, and we played every break time, every lunchtime. We'd play kind of 2 up, 2 down, like just do silly games. And I think just like not having the pressure, and just, that everyone talks about those 10,000 hours. I don't think it was deliberate practice that we were doing, but we would just play for hours and hours and hours. And like, it was basically like our version of just a kick around. And I think that was probably some of my happiest moments.
Have you got any? I'm sure you have, and enough time has passed now. Have you got any sort of memories of things that happened and that you can sort of share with us from your years at school?
And again, anything input?
Well, I'm just thinking from a sporting perspective. I don't know if there are members of staff who you remember. I mean, I have a memory of Roy Archer telling a story of playing you once in a singles match. I think I'd tried to play you once. I'd come up to Shrewsbury with you to accompany not just you but the team. And early one morning, I said to you, look, I've never played this game. Can we go and play? And I remember after about 15 minutes, I looked like I'd been playing for 15 hours because you just ran me ragged and you stood in the middle looking like you hadn't done anything, which is exactly what you had done, other than just made me run. And I remember Roy telling me how to beat you, which you might remember, where effectively he pinned you up against the wall, didn't he?
Yeah. I definitely. I mean, Roy would always pick an opportune moment just to walk on court and be like, "Listen, Toopy, this is how you need to play," and like would show me what I needed to do. So and would invariably end up with me just sort of like pushing me up against the wall, so I was blocked in and couldn't go anywhere. I remember.
If only we could get him on to give his version of events.
I'm sure it'd be completely different, but I remember bouncing off various Paul Holland's tackle pads at points, and being told I was really soft. I needed to train harder. I'm struggling to remember other sporting memories.
No, that's all right. There's some they all sort of blur, don't they? Have you had any recent sporting memories that have stuck in your mind particularly?
So it's been a long time since I've won anything. But we did. I mean, over the last. So I think the last time I won a nationals title was probably like 7-8 years ago. And still playing regularly with Matt. We under lockdown couldn't finish the national men's, the Kenward, which is the national men's title. But actually, Seb Cooley, who was in my year at school, my partner when we won the schools nationals, he's just won his 10th in a row, Eton 5's nationals title. So he's just, I mean, incredible. And I think actually for a memory of him winning that is, it's just an incredible achievement. I talked about doing it for 5 years. He's done it for 10 with his partner. It's just a phenomenal achievement. I think. But we got to a final, so actually had that we played the final in the window, like the September-October window between the two different lockdowns. So we finished off the tournament, and Matt and I lost. We won the first set, as we seem to typically do when we play Seb and his partner, and then lost the next 3. So I remember I've got that sense of frustration and like, what would we do differently next time? I've been trying to discover and do some new stuff. So I've been despite doing loads of sport, I've never had a particularly strong core. So I've been doing yoga more recently under lockdown, just something you can do in the evenings when the kids have gone to bed. And I've actually been like really enjoying that, just like learning something new that it's got a very different discipline to it. So I sort of think you keep, I'm a big fan of like keep learning and trying new things. I'm definitely planning a rugby 5s comeback when I can get to a court as well. I haven't played that for a few years.
That's really interesting to hear you talk about the yoga. We've been doing a lot of fitness with the students online in lockdown, and one of the things we introduced was some yoga and some Pilates. And actually, I think a lot of the students surprised themselves by how much they enjoyed that. And the other thing I want to pick up on is, it's no surprise, you know, we talked about the community of 5s and so on. So when I ask about sort of recent things that sporting successes, it's no surprise to hear you actually talk about and celebrate the success of someone else, you know, someone who obviously you're close to, but nonetheless you sort of, that's where your mind took you. And I think that says an awful lot about you and the 5s community of which you've been a member for so many years. James, I'm very conscious of the time. Can I have a few quick fire questions with you?
Sure, of course.
All right, good luck. When was the last time you cried at a sporting event?
2010, when Matt and I won our last Kenward title.
Name 3 dinner guests that you would choose to have round.
Seb Coe,
That's it. I think Seb Cooley thought he was in there for a minute.
Yeah, Seb Coe, Dina Asher-Smith, and Andy Murray.
Okay, great. Thank you. What's your favourite food after a training session?
So before I did my current job, I really used to like an Eat Natural bar and a strawberry milkshake, but now I know how much like sugar they've got in and how bad they are for you. Like don't believe that they're good for you at all. I probably now just have something light after training. Can't quite pack it in like I did before, but I probably now I'm on rice cakes and peanut butter. I'm probably mixing adult and kid food.
Other than fives, what's your favourite sport to play?
I think it's probably, if this counts as a sport to play, I think like long distance running now. Like I really just like clear my head. My in-laws live up in North Wales in Anglesey. So often when we're up there, I just go on like really long runs just to kind of clear my head. And in many ways, it's less about pushing myself or about distance or time. It's just about going and clearing my head and mental health. So I like, and also when you've got kids and really busy work, it's really hard to get space to do that. So I just going for a run is very precious time at the moment.
Okay, and then lastly, what advice would you give to an 11-year-old James Toop in terms of sport?
Do whatever Howard says.
James, look, thanks so much for your time and wonderful insight into sport and also the work that you're doing. Good luck with that charity. It sounds such a worthwhile cause, and I'm sure a lot of good with it. I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about it in the years to come. But for now, James, your trip down Goddington Lane is over. But thank you for sharing all of those memories. Really appreciate that.
Thanks, James.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Mike. Pleasure.